This is my strategic analysis of China Costco Shipping Corporation. The purpose of this analysis is to go through the external and internal factors facing the container shipping industry as well as China Costco Shipping Corporation and analyze both the internal and external factors through a series of analyses that focus on each. The company history for China Costco Shipping is in 2016, China Shipping Corporation and China Ocean Shipping Company, Costco, merged. The merger was authorized by the Chinese government, which is necessary in that country, unlike here in the United States. This merger created China Costco Shipping Corporation. Costco was founded in 1961 and was China's first international shipping firm. Around 2015, Costco grew into a Fortune 500 company. China Shipping Corporation began in 1997 and was responsible for transporting goods around the coast of China. Over time, China Shipping Corporation entered into the global market. This is each company's individual history prior to merger. The company background is as follows. China Costco Shipping Corporation has 102.83 million deadweight tons for their fleet capacity. The container fleet is ranked number 3 in the world, and their overall fleet is ranked number 1 in the world in deadweight tons. Their fleet is consisted of 1,285 vessels. Their corporation also holds 56 terminals worldwide, 51 of which are container terminals. So, to begin the external analysis, I started with the Pestel analysis, which is a general environmental analysis that looks at the environment affecting the container shipping industry. It looks at 6 factors, the first being political factors, and the political factors affecting the container shipping industry had a high impact on the firms of that industry. The leadership of individual countries and trade relationships of nations were 2 of the primary points going into the political segment of the Pestel analysis. Being a highly globalized industry, it is hard to not avoid political turmoil and have politics really affect the industry and business. The next segment was the environmental segment. The factors going into that were the sulfur cap being implemented by the IMO at 0.05% sulfur in their fuel, and companies having to make changes to their boats, ships, to combat that and be in line with the law as well as work towards sustainability and environmental awareness and protection. Also, vessels entering different regions need to be aware of the invasive species they could potentially be bringing in on their boats, spiders, snakes coming over in fruit boxes, things of that nature. Also, the IMO and other governmental regulations affect the environmental sector of the shipping industry. They firms must align with what these regulations are if they wish to remain competitive and be able to go into different countries and not have high cost of entry into the country and risk fines or worse, maybe not even being able to enter the country due to this, and it could really affect their market share and ability to compete. That's so in the environmental segment has a high impact on firms in the industry as well. The economic segment for the Pastel analysis also had a high impact. Freight rates are something that affect all shipping operations. Firms do not have the ability to set freight rates. They do have the ability to make their prices competitive, but there is a certain freight rate that is set and by Lloyd's List and other things of that nature depending on which industry you're looking at, and the firms don't have much option in that. So if they want to be able to remain competitive, they have to be able to offer the lowest price along with the freight rate. Supply and demand in the industry are also highly important and have a large or high impact on the economics of the industry. Peak seasons for shipping, things of that nature really affect firms, and firms need to be aware of, what the demand is and what their fleet supply is versus what the fleet supply is of the entire industry, so that they don't have more vessels in operation than necessary and are incurring a loss due to that, or so that they can ensure that they have as many vessels as needed in the industry to where they are not losing market share to competitors because of not having a large enough fleet available to consumers. Also, the global and domestic gross domestic products of countries and the world really affect the container shipping industry. Economic downturns, depressions, and recessions really play a large role in the business that the shipping industry receives. If consumers are not requiring the services of the shipping industry, then due to recessions and things of that nature, then there can end up being a lot of empty vessels sitting around not retaining any earnings. And they can oftentimes be sitting at a loss because they still have their operating expenses, maintenance, things like that have to be upheld. The fourth section was the technological segment. This features things such as automation, ship size, ship speed, etc., as well as things like logistical technology, technology within ports, and so much more. These things all really go into affecting the shipping industry. It's with the new turn of society pushing towards more technology, automation, all industries have kind of started to be seen taking this turn, but the shipping industry in particular is really being affected by this because it's been seen that the industry is set in its ways, and now the industry is being forced to change. And that gives the technological advances a high impact as well, because the industry has to stay on top of these advancements, and not having the necessary technology to remain competitive can really affect firms and cause them to lose their competitive advantage over their competition. Sociocultural aspects were covered in the next segment. This includes ships' crews, cultural factors of port countries such as holidays, special days of the week off, like Saturdays, Sundays, things like that are observed by individual countries. Firms in the industry need to be aware of these factors as they're going into ports so that they can plan out their voyage times properly and not end up being late on a delivery because of lack of awareness of cultural things. Also, ship's crew needs to be able to work together, have an understanding. Having a crew that speaks, a bunch of different languages would potentially be a risk for safety. Oftentimes, ships are seen having a crew of a similar nationality or language background, to where if there is any sort of issue, the ship's crew is able to understand each other, and there's not a language barrier potentially causing dangerous or hazardous situations for the crew. The final segment was the legal segment. This features IMO regulations, port state control enforcements, regulations of individual countries. The IMO is a set of nations that it's the regulating body for maritime activity, and there's a multitude of countries that sign on to these IMO conventions and enforce what the IMO sets forth, and firms need to be aware of how each country is individually choosing to enforce these regulations, as well as potential differing regulations, stronger regulations, etc., that individual countries have in place, so that they are able to get into port and get out of port as easily as possible without incurring a loss due to lack of awareness of these regulations. All of these segments covered in the PESTEL analysis have a high impact on the shipping industry. Being such a highly globalized industry, it's hard for things to not truly affect it when it comes to these type of things mentioned in this. The environment of the industry truly really does play a large role in the day-to-day as well as corporate activities that firms within the container shipping industry deal with. Next was the industry analysis. So this covered what the industry kind of looks like and what really goes into making up the container shipping industry. So, like stated before, it is a highly globalized industry. There are several large competitors, such as Maersk, China Costco Shipping, CM, and Tapping Lloyd, other firms of that nature. There's few small competitors that are truly worrisome for the large competitors. It's kind of it's hard for the small competitors to compete whenever it comes to such large competitors with large fleets that are able to utilize economies of scale, and it's hard for small firms to achieve that. Overall in the industry, that commercial fleet size is consistent of 1.86 billion deadweight tons. It's a fast-growing industry over the last few decades. There's been a lot of rapid change, technological advancements, environmental standards that have been changing at a very fast pace, and things of that nature. It's a highly competitive and highly fast-paced industry. Next was the Porter's Five Forces analysis. The following slide, after this one, will go into more detail about each of these categories, but this analysis identified that the threat of new entrants into the industry is a weak force, the threat of substitute products is a moderate force, and the bargaining power of buyers is a moderate force, the bargaining power of suppliers is a weak force, and the rivalry among competitors is a strong force. The next slide will go into why each of these was determined to be the way it is. So the threat of substitutes is a moderate force. Alternate transportation modes are rarely a threat unless it comes to time sensitivity, things like that, but there's almost no way to get large amounts of goods, especially heavy goods, across the ocean aside from shipping. Planes are really only good for things like iPhones, stuff that's needed in a fast amount of time and is shipped in a small quantity or has a light weight to it that can um, and rail transport, like it can be a threat with like coastal shipping, but overall global oceanic trade, um, rail shipments and truck freight are not really a threat at all. Competing firms are more of a threat, especially when you get to the if you're a small firm competing with a large firm or large firms competing against other large firms. Um, it kind of balances out to where the threat is overall a moderate force when you have to include both the alternate modes of transportation as well as um, competitors and their substitute services within the industry. The threat of new entrants into the industry is a weak force. There's a high cost of entry to enter into the um, container shipping industry. High capital investments are required. It's hard for new entrants to match fleet size and quality of competitors. Uh, if you only have one or two ships, it's going to be really hard to remain competitive for long in the industry and go up against the giants like Maersk and COSCO. The bargaining power of suppliers was determined to be a weak force. Suppliers for daily operations are interchangeable. Suppliers for shipbuilding have more power than bunker suppliers and others of that sort. If we're just speaking about things like stores and rations for the ship, as well as like fuel, bunkers, um, things like that, then it really depends on each port, but ultimately there are a multitude of suppliers and shipping companies kind of have their choice. They have their go-to, and it there's not a very high switching cost if in most circumstances the firm wanted to go to a new supplier, they could pretty well easily do that. Now when it comes to shipbuilding, the threat the bargaining power of suppliers is stronger. There's not many shipbuilders in the world. And it just really kind of depends on the firm's relation, the nationality of the firm, things like that, as to where that bargaining power of the suppliers lies. If there's a good relationship with the shipbuilders, then that can affect the bargaining power and it can weaken it for the suppliers because of that relationship. They want to keep, if you're a giant firm like Maersk or COSCO, then these shipbuilders are going to want to keep building ships for you, and they're going to lose their bargaining power to an extent because they know that you have the capital to go to a different shipbuilder. Now, if you're a smaller firm, then it would be a stronger force. But overall, if we're looking at the big major firms in the industry, the bargaining power of suppliers would be a weak force. The bargaining power of buyers is a moderate force. It is dependent upon market conditions. There's a low switching cost. It doesn't cost, companies much at all to switch from Maersk to COSCO if they want to get something shipped across the ocean. A lot of it would depend on availability of ships, the route, the dates. There's a lot of factors that go into this that make it a moderate force rather than a strong force or weak force. It kind of evens out on both ends because the market conditions can change day to day, and there's no real way to say it's a strong force or it's a weak force. It's very in the middle because it is very dependent upon current market conditions as well as time sensitivity, product or shipment size, and a lot of various factors like that. The intensity of rivalry was recognized as a strong force. Firms are highly competitive and there's large room for growth in the industry. A lot of the top firms have this sense of refusing to fail. They refuse to allow themselves to go under, and they keep fighting. They're not going to just, they have the fleet size. They're not just going to disappear one day unless something drastic was to happen. They keep pushing. The rivalry is up there. They would do almost anything to not fail. Next was the driving forces of the container shipping industry. The driving forces for the container shipping industry were recognized as globalization, service excellence, sustainability, and technology. The next slide will go over how each of these driving forces affects the industry. So, globalization, the industry has pushed companies to globalize. The industry has been globalized for a while, international trade and things of that sort. But over the last couple decades, there has really been a push for more ships, larger ships, more routes, quicker shipping times, things of that nature that have pushed globalization to the max. And it's been a major drastic change over the last few decades, and it's still just driving that home with these firms, just getting stuff from the other side of the world. It's just that interconnected web has been really driving the container shipping industry. Sustainability has been another major driving force. Societal push towards environmental awareness as well as longevity of firms is a major thing. You want to be able to be still having your ships go across the world in a few years. You don't want to burn up all the fossil fuels or pollute the ocean so much that there's no marine life. There's been a major push for these firms to start taking care of the environment that they're part of. There's been a push for firms to take responsibility and be aware and push for sustainability within the environment for their resources and things like that. Also, technological advances have revolutionized the industry. Automation, ship technology, logistics technology, day-to-day operations technology. The advancements in all of these categories have, and so much more, have really been pushing the industry forward. There's been major changes in technology just in general over the last 10 plus years, and that has really been seen as, and has really been driving the shipping industry to change and, get with the times, and having these, being up to date with technology for firms on their vessels is almost a necessity for them to stay competitive. The final driving force was recognized as service excellence. Customers have been on an upwards trend of demanding quality services and products. They want their goods getting to them in good condition, on time, at a good price, and that's something that's really been driving the industry. Safety and all that play into this, and that's just something that firms should really be focusing on. All of these four are. So next was the competition analysis. So the five main firms in the industry were identified as Maersk, CMA, CGM, Costco Shipping, Hapag Lloyd, and MSC. So you can see the competition analysis shows the quality of service and the diversity of fleet. So Maersk is kind of the best at both. They have a high diversity and high quality. CMA, CGM has it's kind of in the middle. They have pretty decent quality and a pretty good fleet diversity. They're kind of in what I would say is the ideal spot for a firm. They are pretty decent size, and are well positioned against their competition. So MSC is got high quality, but their fleet diversity isn't quite matched. Costco has a little bit lower fleet diversity compared to Maersk, CMA, and MSC. They, as we go into the internal analysis for them, it will be seen what they actually possess as a company, but their main thing is container shipping. They do have other areas, but it's their primary portion of their fleet is going to be container ships. Um, and then Hapag Lloyd is kind of at the lower end of the compared to their competition. They are low on diversity and quality, especially compared to Maersk. They're kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum. And the next slide will go more into detail about the overall competition within the container shipping industry. Um, the competitive analysis recognize the primary firms in the industry are China, Costco Shipping, Maersk, and MSC. You could also throw CMA in there. CMA and Hapag Lloyd are also top firms in the industry. CMA is kind of up there with MSC, Costco, Maersk, and firms have been pushing to increase ship size, speed in order to remain competitive. That's been recognized as the main competitive move for firms within the industry right now is to beat their rivals on ship size and shipping speed. Being able to carry more goods at a faster speed for a lower cost than their competitors is essentially the primary focus right now amongst a lot of the top firms